That was both a job and a role that I loved. But it was also, when I reflect back, a job and a role that I put too much of my personal time in without ever actually getting as much back as what I was giving. And it was also a job where for so long I tried to be perfect. And clearly at the end of the day, it didn't matter how hard I worked, how much I contributed. At the end of the day, I was just a person to that organization. And they didn't necessarily have that much emotion when they made the decision to eliminate me, as well as made the decision to eliminate other people.
Welcome to Success Reimagined. I am Dr. Amna Shabbir, your host on this journey to thrive at the intersection of ambition and wellness. In every episode, I'll help you challenge outdated definitions of success, discover practical tools and strategies for growth without compromising your well-being. I am so glad you've joined me. Let's reimagine what's possible together. Hello and welcome to another episode. Today I have Mr. Geoffrey M. Roche. He's the son of a nurse, a healthcare expert, a diversity advocate, and education enthusiast, presently serving as the inaugural North America Director of Workforce Development at Siemens Healthineers. In this role, he leads all national workforce development strategy and partnerships to advance a sustainable, future-ready healthcare workforce. He speaks often on healthcare workforce topics at acclaimed global conferences. In 2022, Geoffrey was nominated to the Forbes Business Council for his national-level work. He has over 16 years of experience in hospital and higher education leadership in the U.S. He has served on various boards and committees and presently serves on the JFF Corporate Innovation Council representing the healthcare industry. Just wow to all of that. And I know that I had to make the introduction brief. So welcome to the show and the conversation, Mr. Roche.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I've just been following you for so long on LinkedIn, and just the amount of posts that you make and the content that you put out is reflective of a lot of things that you model in healthcare as a leader. So I just want to thank you, first of all, because I feel that just by looking at your posts, there's such a draw to somebody who has gone through burnout, who has gone through on the other side of the situation, where you don't feel heard, you don't feel like you are being witnessed and seen. So I really want to first thank you for that.
No, you're so welcome. And obviously it means the world to me when I hear the impact that those types of stories and experiences, and to your point, we have to talk more about what we've experienced, because obviously it can help others.
Absolutely. So talking about experiences, and I know that a lot of conversation we're going to have today is going to center around the theme of perfectionism. My first question to you is a very direct one. Do you identify as a perfectionist? And if you do so, is there any early childhood memory that comes to your mind when I ask this question?
It's an insightful question. I will tell you that there's no doubt, when I look back at how little Geoffrey grew up, there were definitely times where back in the day, I probably without question would have identified as a perfectionist. And what I learned, though, when I reflect on that, was that actually that process, that sort of way of living, in many ways is what contributed to some of the most difficult challenges that I've experienced in life. And so even when I started my career back in 2008, without question, I can remember actually my first CEO saying to me, who I adore, one time said to me, when you send me an email, you don't have to write, "Dear Miss Cook." She's like, it's almost like you're sitting there making sure that every part of every aspect of your email is done with perfection. And what I learned now coming here into 2025 is, no, I do not identify as a perfectionist now. In fact, today, and somebody that has led teams and loves to lead teams, I really identify as somebody who knows that I'm going to make a mistake, and I know that I'm going to bounce back better making that mistake than I did before I made it. And so kind of a transformation when I think about the caterpillar to a butterfly, think about that idea. Very, very much on this question is what I've faced in my life.
So that is a complete journey that you're describing, that from going to focusing on every word of every sentence in an email to where you find yourself right now. I'm not afraid to make mistakes, and being open to actually model that to teams that you're leading, because you're trying to always hold your cards closer and put a mask on as a leader. Backtracking a little bit to that specific moment, what was it that really clicked for you? Was there a day you were like, that this is it. I guess I'm done. Share a little bit about that.
Yeah. I'll tell you probably the most dynamic moment where in many ways changed so much of my mindset, as well as so much of how I approached not just my career, but also life, was actually, I can remember the date, the time very, very well. It was actually January 26th of 2017, where the hospital system that I worked at for just under 10 years
Mhm.
had been acquired, and we went through organizational restructuring, and I obviously was in a role that was impacted by that restructuring, and that was both a job and a role that I loved. But it was also, when I reflect back, a job and a role that I put too much of my personal time in without ever actually getting as much back as what I was giving. And it was also a job where for so long I tried to be perfect, and clearly at the end of the day, it didn't matter how hard I worked, how much I contributed. At the end of the day, I was just a person to that organization. And they didn't necessarily have that much emotion when they made the decision to eliminate me, as well as made the decision to eliminate other people. And it was really in that moment of profound reflection where my whole career changed. And I said, with great coaching from my parents and incredible supporters, mentors, where they really challenged me to say, and I'm very, appreciative that they did, to say that as I look at the next steps of my career, what's most important is that I have to find what gives me the greatest joy. And I have to not allow another role or organization to feel like they own me, but rather I own who I am and what I am to do and what I am to become. And so it was really in that journey, early 2018 and so on, where that occurred. And I can tell you that when I look back on that time, I'm thankful that I had that experience, because in many ways, while some will view those experiences as a setback, I know that with mature thinking, I now look at it as actually a positive redirection.
It almost sounds like a gift when you say it.
Yeah. To your point, in many ways it was, right? I mean, I say this as a father, and I look at my oldest was just about a little under 3 when that happened. And we were actually expecting our second when it happened. And when I look back, there was so much that I missed in his first 2 years, just because it was almost like I was married to that job and didn't want to ever make a mistake, didn't want to miss this because that could be viewed. And then at the end of the day, it didn't matter. Right. And so I learned so much in that. And so much so to this day that people will say to me, like, it's almost like you walk around and you're not stressed. I mean, yes, there are times where I may be, right, but I've learned how to channel that, and I've learned how to, if I'm finding some of those bad qualities, because I view them as bad for me, trying to come back in, I get right back into what's going to help put them back in the past, and that has just been very helpful for me.
It's almost like a shift as you describe it. And thank you for sharing that very specific, you knew the date, you knew the time, and you reflect back, it's like an undoing where your identity was so tied to the pressure to perform and be perfect at work. And then you recognize that, no, I have autonomy and I need to recognize like what matters to me
Hmm.
and what is going to give me joy in my life as I move forward.
Yeah. So well said. And the autonomy piece is super important, right? I mean, because I never viewed it as that. But to your point, when I look back on the fact, right, when you don't have autonomy, I mean, it's one of the major contributors to burnout. And so I think without question, when we reflect on those experiences, it's truly powerful. Now, let me just say this. To your point, I am super thankful that I had that experience,
Yeah.
because there is so much that I learned and so much that I gained in my tenure there. It's also where I worked for the best leaders of my career to this day. And you heard me say one of them, who to this day is the best CEO I've ever worked for and served with, was one that was challenging me on perfection all the time, all the time. I can remember regularly me saying to her,
Yeah.
did I do that right? And I can remember her saying, when are you going to stop asking me? I
Mm.
wouldn't ask you if I didn't think you would do it right. And now I have gotten to the place where I'm like, hey, if my leader doesn't like how I did it, then let them give me that feedback, because ultimately I'm not going to sit here and worry each detail, whether it's right. Even in my academic pursuits, as a doctoral student, I really, at the end of the day, realize I'm going to make mistakes. I know I am this semester, especially with applied statistics, but I've learned to say, like, let it roll off, because you know what? At the end of the day, I'm still going to move forward.
That is so powerful, as almost like grounding, that you are being so open to receiving feedback in a very different way, that I'm expecting mistakes can happen. And to your point earlier, when you were asking, did I do this right? After every step, I'm reminded of my older child right now. And because she's so much like me, so I can relate, she will literally look at me, did I do that right? Did I do that
Aw.
right? And so I literally told her that I cannot, well, I'm not going to give you an affirmation after every step. It's for you to know. I will let you know if there's something really off. But to the point where we as high achievers develop these traits so early on in life, and it becomes painfully debilitating, right? Can you imagine?
Mhm.
You were doing it, you were asking after every step, like, is that okay? Is that correct? Before
Yep.
you have just this openness and this, like, I'm going to be able to receive this feedback and be okay with making mistakes.
Well, I think to your point, right, this is also where great leaders are defined. So in my circumstance, my CEO was such a phenomenal leader that she knew exactly how to push that button. And so I'll never forget a moment where she said to me, you know what? I'm going to give you an assignment. You're going to lead every aspect of it. You cannot ask me any questions. Run with it. And I will never forget that moment of being like, oh my gosh, but what if I do something wrong? And she looked at me and she said, would I ask you, who I have total confidence in it, to do it if I didn't think you could do it well? She's like, I would do something wrong too. She said, I do it, have something wrong potentially every day. She said, I'm still sitting here as the CEO. I'm still sitting here as a sister, still sitting here as an aunt, still sitting here as a leader. And so those were really, really powerful moments. And I think that's where you see great leaders defined also in those circumstances. You know, instead of having somebody that sits there and says, just gives you the answer, instead of somebody who just sits there and says, no, no, it's okay. Somebody who's going to say, no, no, you're going to do it. And I believe in you. And I have now been in the position where I've had to provide that same guidance to others. And obviously, to your point, it's very helpful when we can be vulnerable as leaders and we can be honest, because you know what? When we can truly show our true colors, people actually relate. People actually realize we're real, and they realize we're not just this person sitting behind an ivory tower.
That is such an excellent way of modeling to someone you're trying to mentor and grow. I'm racking my brain, and I'm really struggling to find out an instance where somebody said very openly, especially during training at any point, that it's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. And it is so critical that fallibility was modeled to you as being okay. It's almost that in that moment, your leader also demonstrated self-compassion right there, that I'm going to make mistakes and that's okay. I'm still here. And if you make a mistake, it's going to be okay. That is so huge.
I think it's also human, right? Like when I think about this, and obviously now in a place where I've seen leaders from many different countries and leaders from various different backgrounds, and what I've really realized at the end of the day is the best leaders are those that remain humble and don't forget their humble beginnings. And I think in the circumstance of my CEO that I've been referring to, she started as a unit secretary, worked her way to become a nurse, first in her family to go to college, became a nurse, worked her way from a nurse to nurse leadership to other operational leadership roles, CNO, COO, and then obviously president and CEO. But yet, even as the president and CEO, where for so many people when they reach that, walk around as if they're to just be treated with respect, but to me respect also has to be earned. She never ever made anyone feel that they were below her. She always made people realize that she was there serving them just as much as they were there serving the hospital and serving the community. And I think that humility, without question, made such a difference. And for me, as somebody who was early in his career, I had the best model that I could have ever had.
There are three themes that have so far stuck out to me. I'm hearing gratitude, I'm
Mm.
hearing humility, and I'm hearing self compassion modeled openly to you. So as we talk about leaders and leaders either in healthcare or leaders more broadly, when I love all the posts that you've made that focus on inclusivity
Mm.
and diversity, and you're somebody who champions that. So as you look at perfectionism in specific, it often affects underrepresented groups who feel like pressured that they have to be perfect to gain acceptance. How do you help create a culture where people feel comfortable being themselves and that that's enough? And that they matter and belong.
Yeah, I think this is such a powerful question, and certainly one that I think also comes at such an interesting time, particularly here in the United States, because over the last year and still where we sit today, we've had really an assault on the important matters of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And we've had many corporations and employers really kind of peel back and stop investing in these critical areas. And I can't stress enough that these areas require investment, and they really require genuine caring concern, because ultimately it's caring for people. And the reality of it is that everyone's cultural, everyone's ethnic, everyone's gender, or if you don't have or don't identify with a specific gender, where we came from, who we are, and how we want to be treated should always be a priority of every leader and every organization. And it should never be deprioritized. In fact, when we deprioritize these matters, we have to realize the life and death decisions that we're making. Because the reality of it is that these are truly, really situations that truly relate to mental health. And they also just relate to all aspects of health. And so for me, it really comes down to a basic premise that as a leader, and all leaders need to really ask themselves, what are we doing each and every day to create community? And how within that community are we showing respect, appreciation, value, and a level where everyone feels that they're heard and heard for who they are, not heard for who they're protecting from whom they may be.
Mm.
People need to have that. And I will tell you, I mean, this is something that I've always been something I was raised on by my family. And it's also something that I've been challenged on as a white privileged male. I can walk into a room, I can walk into space, and I don't have to necessarily have to be worried about getting to the table. I don't have to worry about being judged in the same way that so many people do. And a mentor of mine several years ago said to me, "You know what, Geoffrey? You can champion these things." She said, "But I want to challenge you one step further." She said, "I want to make sure that you're advocating so that others can get there." And that challenge is something that I accepted, because we have got to change this. And I'll tell you, a number of years ago, I was in Denver, Colorado at an event, and there was a speaker there. His name is Josh Miller, and Josh does some incredible work in this space. And he was talking about a project that is called the Covering Project. And Josh's work in this space is truly transformational. He travels in very rural, very red parts, conservative parts of the country. And he's going there working with community-based organizations and trying to help people to find their sense of belonging in times where it can be really hard to find that. And in his work, while he was there, I had the privilege of meeting Josh actually through a fellowship that we both did during COVID. And then I got invited actually by Josh and his partner to this event. But I didn't realize how powerful this event was going to be, both for me personally and professionally, and for others. But Josh asked a very, very important question there. He asked all of us to reflect on what we may cover ourselves or what others in the workplace may be covering. Do we know what they're covering? Are they covering their religion? Are they covering their gender, or they're not identifying as a gender? Or are they covering a situation at home that they don't want people to realize? Are they covering the fact that they've been married, but they're actually gay? All these things we don't know. But what we do need to know is that when we create community and when we create a sense of belonging, people will actually feel valued, respected, and appreciated and recognized. And we'll get to actually break down those silos and be able to be there for one another. And I can remember walking out of there and thinking, wow, if every workplace, every environment did that, imagine the impact that we would have on society, the true impact. And so for me, it really comes down to that basic premise.
You really elegantly put that. And thank you for sharing that experience that you had with Josh. So, looking at that, what I'm taking away is everyone deserves a seat at the table, and everyone deserves a voice and to feel like they inherently belong. And as we kind of look forward and shifting gears a little bit, and I really want you to think about these other leaders who are in healthcare in specific, because a lot of them hold on to perfectionism as their favorite flaw.
Mhm.
And one of the things that does create even that distancing between where you're allowing all voices to be heard on the table is that the distancing is happening because you're trying to keep up with this facade. And I say it's your favorite flaw because when were asked in an interview, can you tell me three strengths and one weakness? We sort of tout that, oh, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. What would you say to these leaders in healthcare? What can they do differently? And so that they can differentiate that they're striving for perfectionism versus healthy striving?
Really, really good question. And let me first say, especially for HR professionals that may hear this, just get rid of that question. I mean,
Mm,
the reality of it is we're perpetuating, creating these circumstances where we're making somebody self-reflect in a negative way rather than helping them to reflect in a positive growth mindset manner. I
yeah.
think that's part of the challenge we have in society is we're not helping people to really realize the positives and the opportunities rather than really focus on the negatives. I have never liked any of those questions. Don't ask me about a weakness.
Right.
That's not how this should ever be viewed because it's asked as if like, oh, if you don't tell me a weakness, you're not going to get the job. I just think
Yeah.
how we approach these things, we have to think about really matters. I do think though, what I would say, and I think this is something that I have also had to be coached on and something that I've had to be challenged on and continue to be challenged on is we have to authentically be ourselves. We have to realize that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not get it right. The question we need to ask ourselves is are we doing it? Are we doing our best? Are we representing our best self? Are we working to contribute in a positive, constructive, transformational manner? Some of the most successful people in the world have made so many mistakes. I think of a time in our nation where we're mourning the loss of President Jimmy Carter. When you think of Jimmy Carter, people will say his presidency was 4 years of mistakes. Yet, when you actually look back on the transformational impact of President Carter, created the Department of Education, created the Department of Energy, brought humanitarian peace to parts of the world that never thought were possible. Even in his post presidency, was sent to numerous countries to broker peace deals. And the reason he was sent was because they remembered what he did when he was president. So at the end of the day, when you think about that, what I think is important to take away from that is mistakes are human. And no one is to judge another person for a mistake. And especially in healthcare, it's really important to reflect on this because we have seen far too many times clinicians held accountable in a very wrongful manner for a mistake that ultimately worsened the culture of that healthcare system simply because instead of saying, how do we learn from that mistake, we chastised and criticized them and actually refused to support them even when it went to court. That is not how you create psychological safety. That is not how you create a just culture. And so, for my healthcare colleagues, and especially those that are in leadership roles, the most important thing you can remember is your humble beginnings. Think about it. You also make mistakes. Who are you to hold somebody back because of a mistake? The challenge for us all as leaders is to sit back and say, how do we take that mistake and turn it into a learning moment that becomes transformational and impactful for all of us? That to me is such an important message that all of us not only can learn from, but all of us can practice every day.
That was really beautifully shared because when we're, especially in healthcare, as you've mentioned, if we don't openly allow psychological safety to be there, we don't learn from the mistakes, we harm more people. We harm people in so many different ways. We're harming communities by this culture of criticizing and silencing. And people are leaving healthcare for this very reason. And we're suffering for all the different things, the downstream impact of just not allowing imperfections and learning from that. Humanity is humane moment, a human time, because we just want everything to be so flawless and perfect.
100%. And I think to your point, the point about people leaving is such an important one because when you look at it, the challenge we have in healthcare is the ones that are leaving are the legacy. We're losing our clinicians and our professionals who are the future. And so this is why this has to be a top priority. And my fear is that far too many leaders and far too many organizations aren't realizing actually how bad this truly is. And it's going to come way too late until they do.
I echo that same fear and concern with you. And I also like to empower all the non-clinical community people that are just general humans. All of us are also going to be impacted when clinicians leave, because the ones that leave are the ones that are the most compassionate, most caring, and they really put in the work. So it's sort of a wake-up call for all of us. How can you advocate for our clinicians? How can we advocate for our own health by advocating for our clinicians? Geoffrey, as we wrap up for today, this has been so phenomenal, so insightful. I want to keep going on, but I also want to be respectful of your time. Any parting words if you could just look back at your younger self, this question comes up quite frequently, and you really look at that perfectionist version of you, what would you say?
I would definitely say, I think without question, we've talked about, right? There's so much that I learned through that journey that certainly has benefited me today. In many ways, probably if I didn't have that experience, wouldn't necessarily be who I am today. But when I look back, there's definitely aspects that I would definitely have told myself, don't be so hard on yourself. Without question. And this is still something I have to work on to this very day. In fact, my family and my friends that know me well will say I'm so tough on myself. My colleagues will say that as well. I definitely would remind myself that life is truly a marathon, and you don't have to finish that 26.2 miles as a younger person. You have to just continue to chip away at each mile and continue to make progress and achieve each milestone, and then take time to reflect and pause and celebrate them. Because in the end, when you reach that destination, it's actually going to be those moments of reflection that are going to stand out as compared to the full completion. And so for me, that's definitely what I would tell myself. And I definitely, again, would remind myself, don't be so hard on myself. Stop talking so negative to myself. That element of focusing on a positive growth mindset, without question, is just something that I think has been a great reflection point for me, and I know will continue to be.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I almost felt like you were talking about me when you were talking about yourself. It is a process, and being so open and so gracious with sharing your experiences has been helpful for all of us to listen. Thank you for your time today. This has been so incredible.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
This episode is part of a special series and my budding book project on unmasking perfectionism. Thanks so much for spending time with me today. Just a quick reminder, while I am a physician, I'm not your physician, and nothing in this podcast is medical advice or any kind of professional advice. Everything shared here is based on my personal experiences, and the views expressed are entirely my own. If you enjoyed today's episode, I would love for you to rate, review, subscribe, and share the show with anyone who might need a little inspiration to redefine their own version of success. I'll see you next time. Until then, keep reimagining success one small step at a time.